Searched web. Payday Super Australia. July 2026 changes employer superannuation guarantee payment frequency legislation. Searched web. Payday Super 2026. ATO rules. Current quarterly super payment versus payday frequency employer obligations. Searched web. Payday Super impact employees, retirees, older workers, unpaid super gap. Compounding effect retirement savings Australia. Now I have all the verified facts. Let me write the script. Format. The pension decoder, explaining how a specific rule mechanism works. I need exactly 2,000 words, plus 1%. There was a letter in the pile, not a bill, he could tell those by now, but something from the ATO, the blue crest in the corner, sitting between a Bunnings catalogue and a birthday card from one of the grandkids. He carried the whole stack inside, put the kettle on, and then did what most of us do. Left the government letter for last. When he finally opened it, it was about superannuation, something about changes to how employers pay super, starting July 2026. He read it twice, then he put it face down on the bench and waited for the kettle to click. If that sounds familiar, you are not alone. Because this month, July 2026, something genuinely significant has changed in the way superannuation works in Australia, and almost nobody has explained it in plain language. It is called Payday Super. And whether you are still working, winding down, employing someone, or simply trying to understand what is happening to your retirement savings, this one matters. So let me walk you through it properly. I know a bloke, been running a small plumbing business for close to 30 years. Good operator. Pays his team on time, every fortnight, without fail. But when it came to super, the rules allowed him to pay it quarterly. So he did, not out of laziness or bad faith. That was simply how the system worked. He would batch up 3 months of super contributions and send them through before the 28th of the month after the quarter ended. That was the law. And for decades, that was fine. Except it was not fine. Not really. Because here is what was happening behind the scenes. His apprentice, a young bloke earning roughly $65,000 a year, was having his super paid 4 times a year instead of 26. That means for weeks at a time, money that had already been earned, with the 12% sitting in a holding pattern, was not in the super fund. It was not being invested. It was not compounding. It was just sitting there, waiting for the quarter to end. Over a full working life, according to modelling from the Association of Superannuation Funds of Australia, that delay in timing alone could cost a worker thousands of dollars in lost investment returns by the time they reach retirement. Not because the money was stolen, not because the employer did anything wrong, simply because of the gap between earning it and it actually arriving. That is the problem Payday Super was designed to fix. And now, as of the 1st of July 2026, it is the law. Right, so here is how it actually works, and I will keep it plain because the legislation itself is not exactly bedtime reading. Under the new rules, employers must now pay superannuation at the same time they pay wages. Not quarterly, not monthly if they feel like it, on payday. If you pay your staff fortnightly, super goes fortnightly. If you pay weekly, super goes weekly. The contribution, still 12% under current rules, must reach the employee's super fund within 7 business days of the payday. Not 7 days from when the employer gets around to it. 7 business days from the actual pay date. That is the window, and it is a hard deadline. Now, I want to be upfront about something. For most employees, especially those of you who are over 60, approaching retirement, or already drawing on your super, this change is not going to dramatically alter your retirement balance overnight. If you are 63 and planning to retire next year, the compounding benefit of more frequent contributions over the next 12 months is real, but modest. This reform was designed with the long arc in mind. The 25-year-old apprentice who now gets 40 years of weekly compounding instead of quarterly. That is where the big numbers live. But here is why it still matters to you, even if you are closer to the finish line than the starting block. And this is the part nobody seems to talk about. For years, decades, really, one of the most common problems in Australian superannuation was unpaid super. Employers who meant to pay it but ran into cash flow problems. Employers who delayed it deliberately. Employers who simply forgot, because quarterly deadlines are easy to miss when you're running a business. The ATO estimated that billions of dollars in super went unpaid every single year. Billions. And the people most affected were often casual workers, part-time workers, and people in smaller businesses, exactly the kind of workers who could least afford to lose it. Under the old system, you might not even notice your super was missing until the end of the quarter, or later if you were not checking your fund regularly. And let us be honest, most people were not checking their super fund every month. The statement came once a year, you glanced at the balance, and if it seemed roughly right, you moved on. That is not a criticism. That is human nature when you are dealing with a system that was never designed to be transparent. Payday Super changes that equation. Because when super lands in your fund at the same time as your wages, you can see it. You can check it. If you are paid on a Thursday and your super does not appear within a week or so, you know something is wrong. Right away. not 3 months later. It is accountability built into the rhythm of your pay cycle instead of hidden behind a quarterly reporting window. And here is the bit that surprises most people. There is a new term you will start seeing on your pay information. The old concept of ordinary time earnings, OTE as the industry called it, has been replaced by something called qualifying earnings. Now, before your eyes glaze over, the practical difference for most employees is minimal. Qualifying earnings covers essentially the same ground. Your regular wages, salary sacrificed amounts, bonuses, commissions. The calculation base has not changed dramatically. But the terminology has, and if you see it on a payslip or a super statement and wonder what it means, that is all it is. A renamed and slightly tidied up version of what was already there. Under current ATO guidance, the super guarantee rate of 12% is calculated on these qualifying earnings. Same rate, different label. Now, stay with me on this next part, because it affects anyone who runs a small business or employs someone, even casually. If you are a self-funded retiree who still does a bit of consulting, or you employ a cleaner or a part-time gardener through a proper arrangement, these rules apply to you too. The 7 business day window is firm. And here is something worth knowing. The ATO's Small Business Superannuation Clearing House, which a lot of small operators relied on to process super payments, was retired on the 1st of July 2026. It is gone. If you are using it, you need an alternative. A SuperStream-compliant payroll system or clearinghouse. Your accountant or bookkeeper can point you to one, and most modern payroll software handles it automatically now. But if you have not updated your system, this is genuinely urgent. I know that sounds like a lot. And I also know that for some of you watching this, the instinct is to think, well, I am nearly retired. This does not really affect me. Fair enough. But consider this. If you have adult children in the workforce, if your grandchildren are in their first jobs, this reform protects them in a way the old system did not. Their super arrives when their pay arrives. No more gaps. No more hoping the employer remembered. No more discovering 3 years later that an entire quarter went missing and trying to recover it through a complaints process that felt like pulling teeth. For those of you who are still working, even part-time, even casually, here is what I would suggest, and this is not financial advice, just practical common sense. Log into your Superfund's website or app, check that contributions are appearing regularly, in line with your pay cycle. If you are paid fortnightly, you should see contributions landing roughly every 2 weeks. Give or take a few business days for processing. If you notice a gap, if a pay cycle goes by and nothing appears, raise it with your employer first, and if that does not resolve it, the ATO has a dedicated reporting tool for unpaid super. You'll find it on ato.gov.au. You do not need to feel awkward about it. This is your money. It was earned the moment you did the work. And here is something worth sitting with for a moment. For decades, the super system operated on a kind of trust. You trusted that your employer was doing the right thing every quarter, and most of the time, they were. But the system made it easy for things to slip through the cracks, and when they did, it was the employee who wore the cost. Payday Super does not fix every problem in the superannuation system. It does not make the tax rules simpler or the pension thresholds less confusing. But it does something fundamental. It closes the gap between earning your super and receiving your super. And that gap, quiet as it was, cost real people real money for a very long time. There is something else this connects to, and it is worth exploring further. How the timing of your super contributions interacts with your investment returns, especially as you approach retirement and start thinking about which investment option your super sits in. That is a pattern worth understanding and something we go deeper into in another video. But for now, here is what matters. Payday Super is live. It started this month. Your employer must now pay your super when they pay your wages, and it must reach your fund within 7 business days. The rate is still 12%. The system has a new term, qualifying earnings, but the practical calculation is largely the same. And for the first time, you can track your super contributions in real time, alongside your pay, instead of waiting for a quarterly surprise. If this helped make sense of something that felt like just another government change buried in jargon, you might find the next video useful too. It connects directly to how your super balance is assessed when you apply for the age pension, and why the timing of contributions can actually matter more than most people realise. And if you know someone who is still working, your son, your daughter, a mate who runs a small business, share this with them. Because Payday Super affects employers just as much as employees, and the deadlines are already ticking. I am curious, have you checked your super fund since the 1st of July? Have the contributions started landing differently? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and your questions genuinely shape what I cover next.